Good morning and welcome to the Zero Risk Migration from DOS to Visure Requirements webinar. My name is Fernando Valera. I'm Alliance Manager at Visure Solutions. We will conduct this webinar today. It'll be a 1-hour webinar. You will be muted for the duration of the webinar, but we will leave some time at the end to for the people to post questions, and we will answer those questions. At the right-hand side, you will find some questions panel where you will be able to post your questions, and we hope to address all of them at the end of the webinar. So please feel free to ask any question you might have during this webinar. During this hour, we will cover some of the topics as to why organizations are transitioning to more innovative requirement solutions. Why is it time to move from DOS and the current situation and the landscape? How is the migration from DOS to Visure Requirements conceived to mitigate the risks associated to migrations? How does the migration work? What's the process behind? And how can Visure Requirements make you and your team more efficient in the day-by-day work? We will spend a little bit of time just showing you some migration offer that can be really interesting for your company during this process. The current landscape of the requirements management processes is making companies and their processes and the systems more complex. We see that we have tighter schedules. We need to release projects and systems in a smaller time frame, while our software is increasing in complexity. Doing so with the previous tools or legacy tools really puts on top of our process a burden that we have to be able to escape from. So previous barriers and the previous problems we've had can actually be surpassed with new technology, and that's what we will try to address throughout the webinar. Many of the DOS customers have expressed the concern in the developments and the new improvements throughout the last years, especially because of the lack of improvements. This has taken many of those customers to feel a little bit uneasy and look for alternatives. It is not clear the future of this tool, especially considering the transition of IBM tools into a JAS platform. On the other side, there are alternative tools and alternative solutions out there like Visure Requirements, which is an all-in-one requirements engineering solution. Visure, as a company, is 100% focused on requirements. We do nothing else but requirements management and engineering. Our mission is to deliver highly innovative solutions out there to the market. And our roadmap, one of the main aspects is the investment in research and development to be able to deliver new features and constant improvements out there to the market. The three main aspects that differentiate Visure Requirements with other tools out there is the flexibility, be able to represent processes in a graphical way, the different meta models, the different elements, something which is quite rigid indoors for those of you who are who have used DOS. The information approach, be able to access the information as in a database, opposed to a document orientation, allows us to be able to visualize the requirements according to the different activities we have to perform. When accessing information on a document basis, we are already stuck into a framework that it's difficult to surpass. Visure Requirements is a comprehensive tool. We try to provide all of the capabilities to cover the complete requirements engineering lifecycle. We're not only managing requirements, we need to deal with all the activities that have to do with requirements. That includes requirements workflows, risk management, change management, configuration management for the requirements, and one of the most important aspects, the reusability support. Be able to deal with nowadays problems such as variants and product lines. And one of the key aspects is the fact that Visure Requirements is an open tool. We try to be an open company, and that's reflected in our products. We use commercial databases such as Oracle, SQL Server, even Microsoft Access to be able to work offline. We use standard APIs. Our integrations cover a wide range of tools that are not targeted towards a specific tool suite, but actually we try to integrate with best-of-breed tools. How can we migrate from existing databases, or what's the approach to reduce and mitigate the risk for migration? First of all, users' acceptance is a key aspect in the migration, and that's why we provide an environment which will be familiar to those users. We provide not only traceability views, list views, hierarchical views, but we also provide a document view with which those users will find familiar, will be able to work directly from the first day, and will be able to take benefit of the new advantages really straightforward. On the technical side of the data migration, there are two key aspects. The first one is that migrations are not only one activity, but are typically consisting of several activities. Our approach to the migration consists of a first migration of a project or a department that will allow us to start using and start benefiting from those advantages in Visure Requirements. The capability to exchange information with those databases, to be able to send requirements and receive requirements back and synchronize requirements in the different databases will allow this department who has already migrated to Visure Requirements to keep communicating and working with the other departments who have not yet migrated. On the other side, we still need to maintain the communication with customers who might be using those. Our technology will allow you to send requirement information and receive requirement information even if your customers or suppliers are still using those. This will allow us to plan and proceed with a step-by-step migration process. How does the migration work? The first step is to be able to bring information from DOS. The first step is to export all the information to an XRI file. All that information in the database, all the requirements, all the traceability, all the attributes will be exported to this file, which will be imported to the different elements in Visure Requirements. The good thing about being an offline migration is that it will allow us to represent a completely different structure to the one represented in DOS. We can obviously keep the same structure, but at the time of migration we will be able to improve the way in which our requirements are being managed. So we will be able to take those modules and include them into the different blocks in Visure Requirements. As a second step, we will be able to exchange or send information back to the doors database. The same way that we imported to an XRA file, we will be able to export from Visure Requirements this XRI file. This XRI file, when imported back in doors, it will highlight whether the elements are new, have been created from scratch in Visure Requirements, and that's some new information we are sending, or if there is a new traceability, or if there are changes in the attributes of the requirement. This will be highlighted in the import process, and users will be able to import those attributes back into doors. In this round-trip exchange of information can be performed as many times as necessary. So when importing information back into doors, we will identify the new elements, the ones which are modified, and this way we will be able to exchange between the databases. All this process is based on what we call XRI. XRI is a format. It's a Visure proprietary format developed in 2003, which stands for XML for Requirements Interchange. This format is it's an XML schema that supports the different artifacts in the requirement space. That includes requirements, code, name, and RTF description. This is really important to make sure we're not losing images, we're not losing OLE objects or anything like that. Requirement groupings, such as user requirements, system requirements, software requirements, all that structure can also be included in the XRI file. The attributes for those requirements, the types of the attributes, and what's really important, the relationships between the different elements that we are migrating from doors into Visure Requirements. So we will end up with exactly the same structure that we have in doors in Visure Requirements. We will proceed to make a brief demonstration on how to import and export an XRI file into Visure Requirements and how those requirements are represented. On the doors side, we provide the corresponding DXLs that can be imported or can be installed in a doors database, and the users will have a new menu, a new XRI menu that will allow them to import and export to this XRI format. So let's proceed and let's see how this process is done in Visure Requirements. The first point is having an XRI file. As I mentioned, we will be demonstrating the Visure Requirement side, and this is an XRI file generated out of doors. Let's take a look at it with an XML reader like this one. The XML file contains just general information on the tool that has generated the file, the requirements groups. So in this case, we see that we are importing a set of user requirements. This grouping comes along with the description, the creation date, the author of the grouping, and also we can bring the attributes that apply to this user group. In here we will have the requirements and the complete list of requirements that belong to this user requirements. One single XRI file can contain several requirement groups. And the most important aspect, having the requirements. So this is the complete list of requirements included in this XML file, and the requirements are brought with the ID, a unique ID, a unique code, a name, RTF description, as we can see here, the author, the date, some administration attributes, and the list of attributes specific to that requirement, like priority, criticality, status, and so on. We also have the different attributes that we're bringing from doors. Again, we will have some user-defined attributes, those that apply to the modules that we have exported to the XRI file, but also we'll have some administration attributes, such as the doors path, to know exactly where that requirement was located in the doors tree, the doors object number, the absolute number, and user-defined attributes such as the actual cost. It's also important to bring the types, if it's an enumerated value, if it's a text value, and finally, the relationships. So relationships consist of, first of all, a type. The relationships can be, for instance, association. They can be flow to, decomposed into, validates, verifies, any different types. The types will be brought back to Visure Requirements, and the relationships. So this XRI file is imported through the import tool. So let's take a look at the application. Let's open Visure Requirements, and let's take a look at how it looks like in the application. So let's open this sample project. And let's go to a view where we can see how the modules imported from doors look like. So this is the result of a first import of this XRI file. And in a couple of seconds, we will proceed to import another XRI file and take a look at the import process. Basically, we have all the requirements here, which have been imported along with the code, name, description, all the hierarchy. And as we were saying at the beginning, the look and feel of this document-like view is pretty much like a doors view. So users will feel comfortable, and it'll be an easy adoption for them. In the left-hand side panel, we see the different requirements that have been brought from doors. The hierarchy has also been imported, as we can see here. The good thing about Visure Requirements is that we are not stuck to a document orientation. There are multiple ways of visualizing requirements. This is just one of the different ways, but we can visualize them in a completely different way. So for instance, if we would like to manage the attributes, we can just filter by the elements in doors which are really requirements instead of chapters, and display the different attributes in an Excel-like view. In here we see the description, and as we can see the different attributes that we will be able to modify directly from this user interface. So we can double click on any of them and just change them. As simple as that. This is not the only way in which we can visualize the requirements in the database, but we can go for other views such as classified by the attributes. So at some point we might be interested in working on let's say luxury or economy mode or anything like that. So we will be able to classify them and select any of the attributes to visualize them in different ways. So in here we see two requirements, two completely different requirements which belong to the luxury variant, but also have some analysis verification method. We will be able to modify these attributes and find out if any of them, for instance, belong to release number 1. So we can see that some of the elements in the luxury car belong to release number 1, as we can see here, and so on. So let's proceed to an XRI import and see how the process, what's the process flow. So directly from the user interface, we have an import capability. And this will pop up the import tool. The first thing is selecting the XRI file. If we have existing configurations, we would be able to make use of them, even though there's almost nothing to configure when importing an XRI file. The second step, and this process is identical when working with Visure Requirements and when working with doors. So the process to import an XRI file in IBM Rational Doors, it's pretty much identical. We will have the list of modules or the list of blocks in Visure Requirements that the XRI file contains. And at this point, we will be able to select which ones we would like to import. Typically, we would have all of them. In here, we only have the user requirements. We will select the user requirements, and we click on Next. This is the complete list of user attributes contained in the XRI file. Typically, we would import all of them for the first time, but in consecutive times, we might want to skip some of them, or we might be interested in importing just one or two of those attributes to find out the differences. So let's select, for instance, the integrated product team and see if there's any change in that attribute. So we click on Next. And what we see is that the tool has identified 166 requirements in the XRI file. So the next process, or the next step in the process, is to check those elements contained in the XRI file against the elements in the database. So it will check for changes in the name, it will check for changes in the description, and it will check for changes in the attributes. So what we see here is that from the 166 elements, there's some of them in red, and there are some of them in blue. That indicates that some of the elements have been created from scratch indoors, and then we are importing them, and some of them have been modified. So we see here all the modifications that have been done indoors. At this point, we can check the differences to find out exactly what has been modified. And here we see that the name and descriptions are identical, but the integrated product team attribute has been modified. We can check the changes in the rest of them. Okay, so again, the integrated product team attribute has been modified, and we can select which ones we would like to import. So we select which ones, perhaps some of the new elements need to be analyzed before being imported, and then we can decide to import them into the database. For the new ones, we can decide if we want to include them in any other element type, like to be reviewed type or something like that, apart from the original location of the requirement, which is the user requirements block. And at this point, we start already with the import of these selected elements. Great. So what we see is that one element has been inserted and 5 elements have been updated accordingly. So we finish and we refresh the view to visualize all the changes performed to the requirements. Perfect. So here we have our updated requirements in the project. Perfect. At this point, if any of you has any question, I would like to remember you that you can post it in the questions panel in the right-hand side. You should be able to display a questions panel. Okay, great. So let's proceed and quickly go through the different aspects that in Visure Requirements that will make our team more efficient compared to those aspects. One of the most appreciated aspects in Visure Requirements is the fact that it's using an open database that will help us reuse existing procedures, backup procedures, or redundancy or anything like that existing in the company. We can put them on top of the Oracle database or the SQL database. The Open API will allow us to access any information in the database, and we don't need to learn any new programming language like the DXL. We might be able to use COM languages or Java languages. Some of you might be familiar with what we call the block diagrams, which are process meta models defining the different element types in Visure Requirements. These meta models, graphical meta models, represent the different types, the traceability between them, and will help us perform change impact analysis, structure the information, and make everybody aware of what we're doing. This is nowhere close to the folder structure provided by DOS, which is pretty cumbersome to manage, and at the end of the day, it's pretty complicated to manage once the project has started. The block diagrams can be modified at any point in time to represent modifications in the process or new element types. The workflows in Visure Requirements allows us to represent the different statuses for a change request, for a requirement, even for a test case, for any element type in Visure Requirements. We will be able to represent it graphically, represent the different transitions, and we will be able to indicate who's responsible for that transition. So not everybody in the company is able or should be able to accept or reject a requirement. Through these workflows, we'll be able to identify that the system engineer is the only one in charge of rejecting or approving a requirement. This is really useful for many of the aspects in requirements engineering. We also provide some graphical capabilities in the tool, like the domains and the domain concepts, which is a way of reducing the ambiguity in the project and make sure everybody's on the same page when dealing with new types of projects, when getting new people on board in the project. We usually work with a glossary of terms, but textual glossaries of terms do not reflect the relationships between the terms. Through this graphical domain concepts, we're not only able to represent the concepts and the different terms, but also how they relate between each other. So we will be able to indicate things like, in this case, that an appliance is composed of several elements, or whether it is one of the elements belonging to the appliance exclusively in charge of the relationship with some other aspects in our domain. So this allows this is targeted to help teams collaborate and communicate in a more efficient way. The fact that it's a graphical way reduces also the complexity, as natural language by definition is ambiguous. Another really important aspect when considering Visure Requirements is the configuration management. The configuration management is completely managed within Visure Requirements. There's no need to integrate with third-party tools, it is embedded in the system, both the individual element versioning and also the baselining. So for individual elements, the access is performed at element level. That means that if we want to modify a single requirement, we can check out a requirement, edit it, without blocking a complete specification. That means that other engineers might be checking out other requirements just on top, just below, within the same specification, and there will be no conflicts in there. So individual versions of requirements are completely managed and dealt in Visure Requirements. On the baseline level, Visure Requirements allows creating baselines of any type of element in the project. That means that we can create a baseline out of the complete project or out of specific types like user requirement specification or system requirement specification. The interesting thing is that the baselines can be activated at any point in time. They can be compared, and we will be able to extract which elements are completely new, which ones have been deleted, and which ones have been modified from one baseline to another baseline. This is a really interesting advantage. When comparing the baselines, we will also be able to find the traceability that has been changed from one version to another version. Perhaps we have two specifications which are completely identical from one version to another version, and only the relationships change between them. The comparison will highlight those changes and will allow us to modify or to identify exactly what has been changed. The traceability matrices is something that we have been working with for so many years in Excel, and which is available also in Visure Requirements. In Visure Requirements, we've tried to make them really useful. So we've created the possibility to filter the columns and the rows which are being displayed. So for instance, we can indicate that we only want to display the rows which have no relationships. In this case, we would display, or we would find out very easily if a user requirement has not been decomposed into system requirements, or if a software requirement is coming out of nowhere because it has no upward traceability. So these matrices are actually converted into validation matrices. Very useful to do checks and find out inconsistencies in the project. It can also, this traceability matrices can also be used as indirect elements, which means that we will be able to find out through the matrix how a user requirement relates to some other elements in the project which is not directly traced. So for instance, if we have our decomposition from user to system to software requirements, and those software requirements trace to software tests, and one of those tests fail, how can we find out how the failed test impacts our initial user requirements? The indirect traceability matrix will display both the user requirements in the rows and the failed tests in the columns, so we will be able to find out that indirect traceability or that indirect impact analysis. On the other side, we can also display that indirect impact analysis in a textual view, displaying all the related elements independently from the module or the type they are in one single view. For those of you who have used DOORS in the past, you will quickly identify the advantages of being able to display in one view the elements from different types, especially for change impact analysis, and find out how a user requirement is decomposed into system requirements. Those system requirements decomposed into lower levels, while at the same time displaying the attributes of all the different types in the same view. And just to finish off with the different capabilities in Visure Requirements, there are numerous improvements or advantages in the access rights management. The possibility that to edit one of the attributes, but not being able to edit some other attributes. Or for instance, someone might be able to create a requirement or edit a requirement, but not some of the attributes. The access rights are really going to the point of the elements. And I'll just quickly go through some of the aspects to leave some time for the Q&A. Just a couple of highlights, like the reusability. Reusability is becoming a really hot topic in the market nowadays, especially because of the different variants everybody has in their portfolio. And most of the times, 90% of the requirements in the products in the catalog are shared. Visure Requirements provides this capability out of the box. It has been thought to provide support to reusability. We do not need to create DXLs or create tricks on the tool to support this process. And to finish off, apart from all these aspects, there are two key elements, and one of them is the use cases capability. Visure Requirements comes out with some UML support, some basic UML support for those of you who would like to do requirements modeling or who feel comfortable with user stories and sharing them with the customers. This is a capability provided out of the box in Visure Requirements. It's not a separate tool or a third-party integration. That's a built-in capability. As for the test cases are also directly related to requirements, and therefore it is something that needs to be managed in the same platform. We provide this type of elements as out-of-the-box items, along with the different steps that need to be carried out to complete a test. As a last point to the presentation, we currently have a doors replacement strategy that can help your companies smooth the path between the tools. If you're more interested on the commercial aspects of this offer, don't hesitate to get in contact with us. Ask us about our doors license replacement, where you will get some advantages if you are currently using doors and would like to replace a doors license by a Visure Requirements license. This will help you reduce the risk, not only on the technical level, as we have seen with the integration, not only on the user acceptance with the Visure Requirements interface, but also on the economical aspect, as the offer is really interesting. And transitioning to innovative tools and tools that invest in the R&D to bring state-of-the-art features to the market will result in more efficient teams. So we will now leave 10 minutes for Q&A. So please feel free to post your questions in the questions panel. So I have a couple questions. The first question is whether XRI is a standard and what's the relationship with other standards. XRI stands for XML for Requirements Interchange. It is a proprietary format developed by Visure Solutions. There are some other standards like RecIF and AP233, which have been out there in the market. What we have done is that we have created this mechanism to support all of the aspects and was developed in 2003. Since that date, it has been in production and many customers in the automotive industry have been using this standard. An interesting thing is that the support to XRI from DOORS and Visure Requirements is provided by the same company. That means that we are reducing the interpretation that can be provided or that standards typically have. So having said that, Visure Requirements, Visure is participating in the RecIF Implementer Forum along with other tool vendors to provide a unique interpretation to the standard. We have another question. Can we import RecIF or previous RIF format exported from DOORS and other tools? As I mentioned, we have a version of RecIF import, but we are working with IBM and automotive manufacturers on a RecIF implementer forum to make sure that all of our interpretations of the standard are common. That will guarantee in the midterm that whatever is exported from DOORS or any other tool in the market has the same interpretation as our import tool. That way we will guarantee import and export processes. This is an ongoing project and it is expected to be released throughout this year. So the current RIF support in DOORS is an IBM interpretation of the standard, and hopefully we will be able to release a unique interpretation of this standard throughout the year. We have another question here. What versions of DOORS are supported? We are supporting 8.x versions and we are supporting 9.1.2.3 versions of DOORS. So 8 and 9 versions of DOORS are supported by the by our XRI import and export. Will the slides from the webinar be made available? This webinar will be uploaded along with the recording and along with the slides. So you will receive a mail with the download links and information to download all the information. So does anybody else have any other question? Great. So thank you everybody for your time. I hope it was interesting and useful. If you would like to receive any further information either on the Visure capabilities or pricing or the migration offer or evaluate the migration, just don't hesitate to contact us at my email address or info.na@visuresolutions.com. Thank you very much.